Good evening, Line Golf Academy members and guests. Welcome back, and we're going to talk today about Michael Block. He is the unsung hero, the Southern California local legend that went up against the best in the world and did compete, and we all heard about it many times. And I'm going to compare his swing to Mr. Rory McIlroy. Now, obviously, I'm going to use this because of the comment that Mr. Block made that if he only had Rory's distance, he would be one of the elites in the world. The problem with that comment is you need to have Rory's swing to have his distance, and I'm going to show you where a couple of power leaks are for Michael Block, and also show you why Rory hits it a ton and pretty straight when he's on. So let's get right to this. We have the lower plane line, the upper plane line, the spine angle line, the back brace line, and the head brace, just to show you some up and down motions. Now, what we're going to take a look at is the setup. Now, I know Michael Block is using some sort of tchotchke on his right wrist to help with the wrist hinge, but we're just going to pretend that's not there. But let's just take a look at the setup overall. About the same setup. However, we can see Rory's feet are further back underneath his hips, and this will kind of play a part in our first initial part of the takeaway. Now, if we take a look at Block on the left side, he pulls his club back one piece, nice, gets a little bit tilty, and when we get to the front view, you will see he doesn't turn as much, which will then cause his hands and arms to get a little bit more involved than he wishes. Some similarities once we get Rory on. And now, keep in mind, I do know that these are slightly different views, so we're not going to get exactly down the line as Rory, but what we can tell from, let's go one more frame, what we can tell from the spine angle versus the club shaft angle, Block is slightly open, Rory is right on the money. So we can already see the hand manipulation taking off in Michael Block's swing a little bit soon. Left forearm is working its way inside for Rory McIlroy, but Michael Block is working more up and down, hence you will see a tilting action with his left shoulder. If we go to the top of the swing here, we can see a couple of differences already. So Rory McIlroy, he is actually below his upper plane line. It could also be the view bit. He typically is a little bit lower, where Michael Block is a little bit higher. But one thing that you will see in great players is that club head will always find its way to the center of their swing. Now, if you take a look and draw a line right from that club head straight down to the ground on both occasions, club head straight down to the ground, you can see that it kind of goes in between their feet, and it usually goes right in between where the spine angle and also the plane intersect. So you can see Rory, look how close he is to that center of his setup, where Michael Block is a little bit higher because of that excess tilt and his lack of turn, and you can see his hands haven't moved quite as far back as Rory, because obviously Rory's 20 years younger and a lot more flexible. Maybe not 20 years, maybe 15 years, but every little year counts in the golf swing. So we can see already some slight disconnection with Mr. Block. Now, when Michael has to recontour and remove his swing down to plane, this is where some troubles can arise, especially when there's pressure involved. Now, he is a definite pressure player. We can see that. What he did in the PGA Championship is quite remarkable. I know he's played in probably 5 or 6 major championships, multiple dozens PGA Tour events, so he is definitely skilled. But what stops him from making that next jump is we can start to see that his swing is more timing oriented as opposed to somebody like McIlroy that is slightly less timing oriented. And when it comes to the best in the world, we have to take advantage of every little thing that we can. So I've taken off those lines so we're not too confused. Now let's take a look at what Rory does on his way down. So his first move is to sit down and pull his arms straight down, and we can see that shaft already falling into line in between this little beautiful gray area that we like to get it in, and they're all trying to match up together. Now, in order to get Mr. Block to pull his club back down, he has to adjust his tilt, and he almost leans back and changes his whole spine angle to do so. So we can see that little motion there. It is already down perfectly in that plane, but what you'll notice is, let's get him in the same frame, is McIlroy is slightly steeper. Now, why is this important? Now, obviously, I'm assuming they're hitting the same sort of club. Looks like it's about the same iron. Is what we can see is Rory McIlroy is controlling the momentum of his club head because it doesn't have to travel as far from his back brace line. Now, if that doesn't make sense, we can draw the club head straight down. You can see it's on his back brace line, where Mr. Block is slightly behind the back brace line. Now, when you are slinging, and this is like a slinger motion, this requires a lot of hand-eye coordination and a lot of hand manipulation, where Rory's requires less hand manipulation and more bigger body driving the golf ball, which is why he hits it so immensely far. So we're going to keep it where it is, and let's take a look at Rory, how that club works its way down. You can see it goes right down that line. Club is slightly open to his spine angle, and from here, because he has worked it straight down, he doesn't have to control the momentum of the club head as much. It is in the slot right away. He turns and drives down into the ground. You can see very little manipulation here with his wrist and hands. He's just driving with his body. So we can see now with the weighting of the club head with Mr. Block, you can see the club head is behind his body now. He has to sling it back around, and this requires a couple things now, as opposed to Rory McIlroy, where he just pulls down his arms and turns with his body. You'll see some turn on the left side with Mr. Block, and also some hand manipulation, because those hands are very high at this point and they're starting to work out. Let's back it up a little bit, and let's also look at the height of the hand, which makes a big difference. You can see Rory's height of his hand is right about hip high, where Mr. Block's is a little bit above hip. Now the problem with that is because the club is laid off compared to Rory, he's lost that club head weighting behind him. That's going to move his hand path a little bit higher, so he has to do some manipulations. A couple of things that he tries to do is turn, tilt, and get his hands to be involved. So he's got three things trying to make that club head move. So we take a couple frames, we can see some body rotation, club face is open, hands are working its way out because that weight in the club is pulling down, so the club head is going down, which will also result in the hands going up. It's like a seesaw action. So as we keep on moving through, now we can see the path of the club is slightly left of his target, but his club face is still a little bit open to his spine angle, which is okay. Now once he gets down into impact, he's going to turn, and also watch that hand action. There goes that exaggerated release where he has to really get those hands involved to help him with all this manipulation of the club head weighting, where Rory McIlroy on the right side, he comes on down, club head goes through, gets that club to impact. As he strikes the golf ball, you can see the club face. Let me just move that line out the way. The club face is slightly closed and it's completely out of picture, but we can see a little bit of a difference. Look at the lower body action, because he's had to do a lot of manipulation with his body to turn a little bit more, where Rory McIlroy is steady with the lower body. He's driving up, he's holding his spine angle, and that release, we can see that club head coming out much lower, where on the left side we can see his release coming out slightly higher, which means there's an excessive tilt going on here, and then you can see the hand path to match that excess tilt, where the hand path is much lower with Rory McIlroy. So we can see that Rory McIlroy is just a machine when it comes to flexibility, strength, rotation, and all the above packages. Well, now let's take a look at the face on, because that'll show you something a little bit different. All right, we got the face on. So we got a few lines here. That tall line on the right side of the screen on each of the players, that's that left impact line. The right brace line on the right side of the leg. We have the shoulder tilt line, and extending from the shoulder tilt line is basically where your hands should be at address. And you can see both players are set up correctly based on their ball position and also their shoulder tilt. Now you can see Michael Block's ball position is a little further back. You can see Rory's a little bit forward. Again, we don't know if this is the exact same club. It could be a little bit different, but it's basically the same for this sake. Now let's take a look at this first part, and we can start to see a couple of things already. So we're going to take a look at Michael Block as he takes that club to about midway point versus where Rory takes it to midway point. Let's just freeze it right about here. We can see very similar positions in terms of the shoulder rotation. However, Michael Block is a little bit more tilty. Now, I'm not sure if he has any hip issues in terms of rotation or shoulder issues, but he definitely doesn't rotate as much on this point going back. His left foot is flared out, his right foot is flared in. Now, when that happens, it does limit your rotation of your hips. Could be something he's working on, could be a swing, we're not sure. But that also will affect your X factor and your top of your swing rotation with the shoulders. So let's take a look from this point as we get to the top of the swing. That's about the top of his swing before transition. And let's take a look at Rory. So we can see a much different position here. Based on that setup spine angle, look at Rory. Rory is still in that same setup spine angle. Not much can go wrong here. He is nice and centered. He is still in that starting position. We can see Michael has moved over. His center is behind the golf ball now. That's the worst straight line. So his center is behind the golf ball line. So you can see some lateral motion. Rotation is nowhere near where Rory is. Rory's in the 110, 120 degree rotation range, where Michael is still stuck probably 70, 80 degrees at the most. Now what that does is you can see the club head is still trying to get back there from Michael. So he has now activated his hands and arms a little bit too much, and he's closed the gap between his arms and his chest. And you will notice this right away as he comes out and tries to repivot his body. So let's go for that downswing, and this is that repivot. So he has to fall back. Let's look at where Rory is in that same situation here, where Rory is starting to get his weight distribution to the left side, which he's really going to strike down the golf ball. We can see that. Look at this. This is basically where Michael Block's backswing turn was, and Rory's halfway down his downswing, where Michael Block is definitely starting to square up his shoulders at impact. Now the issue with this is the distance between the center of his chest and his hands are dramatically shorter than where Rory is. So if we do that center of the chest out, we're talking about this distance here. So this one is directly still in front of his chest. It is because it's connected to that turn, where Michael is not only fallen back slightly, but he has closed that gap because his hands are falling back behind the turn, and this is going to require a late last second little ditch from his hands. So we can see that motion once we take it down a couple frames. So let's move Rory first of all, 1, 2, 3, 4 frames till right where that club is at parallel. We can same thing, one frame. Okay, so a little different there. What we can see is this right shoulder is really tilting down to help him get that turn. Rory's is actually pretty level, which you can see now he's going to pound into that ground. He has to move left to help that, because if he does not move left, he's going to hit very heavy on the golf ball, maybe not even hit the golf ball. So he's getting his weight over to the left side. So he is more like a boxer. He is turning, he is driving, and he is hitting that golf ball with his legs, stomach, and shoulder. Where Michael's kind of falling back, his legs are going underneath him. You can see his weight stuck on his right side, which will require him to do a last-ditch effort to try and turn and get his hands to really be involved. So we can see that here. Great impact position. Looks a little bit contorted because the lower body's going one way, upper body's falling back, but that all has to do with that turn and tilt relationship. And also, like we saw down the line, is where that club head is pulling on the way down based on where that center of the club head is. So that all has to do with controlling your distribution. Impact, we get down to Rory, hands are slightly ahead, body's definitely ahead of where it started. You can see it started back here. Now look where it is. It is well ahead of that golf ball, where we have Michael kind of stuck behind that golf ball. So this is where power loss occurs. So if Michael said, he wanted to hit as far as Rory, I don't know, I don't want to break this to you, but it's not going to happen unless you have that Rory motion. And as we come on out into impact, we can really see those hands on Michael here. 1, 2, and then Rory's going to hold that release. You can see he released it up here as well. We're going to get it to parallel. So look at the difference here. When Rory's swing is at parallel, look how high that club is. Where Michael's at parallel, look how low that club is. This is a sign of somebody that is hanging back and flipping and trying to activate the hands too much to save the swing. This is a sign of somebody that's turning, that's driving, that's extending through the target, which will slow down the hand rotation and hand manipulation. So this is why that swing on the right side can compete at a tour level, at a high quality tour level, and the swing on the left side can compete at a tour level some of the times, and definitely at a club pro level. He's one of the best club pro players in the United States, so we're not taking anything away from him. But once you can see that follow through here, a couple more frames over, you can see the distance between his hands and his chest, much more narrow. We can see the hand manipulation, a couple more frames over there. Look at that hand manipulation. So we're going to get to the same position here. The club, let me clear up some of these lines. So the club now is perpendicular to the ground and perpendicular to the ground. And what can we notice here? Look at the rotation. Shoulders are definitely driven through. That right shoulder is well ahead of the left. Here, the right shoulder is maybe catching up to the left just now. So again, hand manipulation. Anytime you have hand manipulation, overactive hands, you need to hit thousands of balls a week to play at a high tour level quality, which is why Ben Hogan had to do it, which is why Vijay Singh had to do it. This is not the swing you need to try to play at a high quality level unless you have the luxury of of hitting thousands of balls a week, which most of us don't, including Michael Block. He is a golf professional that teaches all the time, and you know what? He did pretty darn good for what he has. Congratulations, Michael Block. Congratulations, Rory McIlroy. Great pairing, great fun. Hope to catch you next time. Have any questions or comments, leave it down below. Other than that, I will see you next time. Fairways and greens.